One, we're finishing up. I'm not finishing the book, but my reading of it. Um, and then I'm not sure what I'm gonna read tomorrow or next week. Actually, tomorrow I have some things to do. I have to get ready for taxes, and I have a couple of businesses, so taxes are always weird. And with this Joe Biden, it's a scary time of year because he took away a lot of things that we had. We don't understand the guy or his staff or whoever's making decisions. Because I still don't believe Biden's doing anything. He's been more coherent lately. It just seems like, but I don't. He doesn't know what century he's in. He's still living in the 80s, 1980s. And I know because I was alive then and I listened to him and he sounds like he did then. So don't be surprised when he start calling your children super predators. It's coming. It's coming. Because he called me and us super predators. Him and Hillary. She wasn't the only one that did it, though. He did it too. Let's get to the reading. In the antebellum South, the slave and the plantation describe tangible circumstances. Today, the slave and the plantation describe a state of mind and conditioning of the mind. Important, the mind is everything. The mind is everything. Everything starts from the mind. That's why when I was young, we used to have a saying, get your mind right. We've dumped that saying because we're out of our minds. In an era of multi-million-dollar salaries, slavery remains the model for power relationship between athletes and their owners. Slavery is about power, control of resources. Control of resources, including your labor and your brilliance. Maybe you have slave inventors. That's what gets you the money. The money's not the power. The control of the resources, the power. And the money represents that. And if the resources is no good, the money really is no good. Just like if you have a college degree, it's supposed to represent the knowledge that you've gained during your studies, during that program. If you haven't studied anything, you just regurgitated whatever your professor did and got your degree, then your degree is really worthless. You can use it, but anybody questions anything and you don't have the knowledge, it's worth less. Not worthless, but worth less. That's very important that we understand that. A day before Game 4 of the 1999 National Basketball Association's finals between New York Knicks and San Antonio Spurs, a throng of media crowded around Larry Johnson, the Knicks veteran forward. I think this was I remember this. This was with Sprewell and Houston. They were the guards. For months, Johnson had refused to speak with reporters. 2 weeks earlier, the NBA had fined him $10,000 for not talking to the media after practice during the Eastern Conference Finals against the Indiana Pacers. He'd been fined another $25,000 during the league finals for again declining the NBA request to speak to reporters. During a Sunday practice session, Johnson not only refused to comply, he cursed the media and the league official for hampering his ability to practice. But now Johnson was ready to give the league what it wanted. The NBA wanted words. LJ would give them words. I don't care if anybody likes me or not, he began. I play basketball. I play for the New York Knicks. My main focus is to win. You guys, maybe you don't like me or not. Fine. I don't care. Ask my teammates. Ask my coach. Y'all can kiss my ass. I don't like you. That has been my motto my whole life growing up. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I make it known I don't like you. That way, we don't have to communicate. Those guys out there are the main focus of my mind, Johnson continued, referring to his teammates. What we have is a lot of rebellious slaves on this team. Not everyone was all ears in the nation that equates wealth with happiness. Johnson's equation of wealth compensated athletes with largely uncompensated slave ancestors set off a maelstrom of angry criticism. Asked to explain what he meant by rebellious slaves, Johnson snapped, "I have to explain that? We don't have a lot of mainstreamers. We don't go along with the masses. We're in a different stream on this team." That year's playoffs culminated a strife-filled season in the NBA that in its own way underscored the meaning of Johnson's rebellious slave metaphor. David Stern, the NBA commissioner, acted on behalf of the league's owners, had bullied, beaten, and outmaneuvered the league's 350 players during a nasty 3-month-long lockout. The dispute exposed a lack of unity among players and revealed how unprepared the Players Association was to launch a sustained battle against the owners. The lockout revealed the extent to which lavish lifestyles had made many dependent on their owners. One poignant example was Kenny Anderson, a guard with the Boston Celtics. Anderson complained that he had a fleet of cars to maintain, mortgages on 2 houses, and child support payments, an admission that did little to win public sympathy for the players' cause. The lockout ended in near complete victory for the owners. This was the backdrop of Johnson's news conference. Okay, again, you get the money, but you spend the money. And it's okay. I mean, money's meant to be spent, but there has to be some kind of stream. Even if it's investments. I mean, if you have money at that level, I mean, I have little investments and I get little dividends. So imagine if you have money at that level, take chunks of it and invest it. It goes up and down. If you don't want to do the market because it's so volatile, or you don't believe in stocks and bonds, you don't want to do that, I mean, housing in your mansions, they usually get mansions. Those are investments too. The cars can be, depending on what you do. If you're going to get a fleet of cars, have a car show every so often and charge a couple of bucks for it. Get you some land, have a car show. Have your friends come with their cars. You have to find ways to generate extra money in case you go on strike or in case you get injured. So now you have a foot in something. And there's so many things you could do. Once you have money, you can really do any business and you'll look successful just because you got money. If you open a store and you're a millionaire and you're an athlete, you don't have to make money for a long time. The business doesn't have to make profits, and you can write off losses with your accountant. You can get a good business accountant. So do that. The reaction to Johnson's comments was swift and unambiguous. Johnson was crucified by the sports media. Sam Smith of the Chicago Sun-Times wrote, "Larry Johnson is simply a jerk, perhaps the worst individual in the NBA." Of course, they don't like when you're supposed to pretend. Steve Bopart, pretend that we're not the same plantation society we were. Steve Bopart of the Boston Herald called Johnson outrageous and said he was like a car accident that you slowed to see. Most of the criticism was aimed at Johnson's lack of gratitude. Here he was, a young, wealthy black male who went from poverty in Dallas to making $11 million a season playing professional basketball, talking about slavery. The players make so much now. He was a star back then, making $11 million. There's people who they call mid-level in the NBA now, making $11 million. And he was a star making $11 million. Some people get minimum and it's like $3-4 million. Right? Back then it was, oh my goodness. And don't talk about Magic and Isaiah and them. They wasn't getting nothing. Speaking to a smaller group of media a day after his rebellious slaves remark, Johnson explained the money had little to do with his analogy of being like a slave on a plantation, but that he was really referring to relationships, namely between owner and worker. Very important. Again, I told you, it's about power. Johnson followed his comments with an abysmal Game 4 of the finals after Johnson's 2 for 8 shooting performance. Bill Walton, the former counterculture basketball player at UCLA, who had over his years as a television analyst morphed into a shrill defender of the mainstream, blasted the Knicks' 29-year-old forward. Larry Johnson, who spent the last 48 hours railing against the world, what a pathetic performance by this sad human being. This is a disgrace of the game of basketball and to the NBA. He played like a disgrace tonight. He deserved it. But when you get that hate on you, man, hate has power when it's coming from a lot of people. And there's a lot of people who hate us. So, Johnson fired back. Damn, Bill Walton. Tell him to trace his history and see how many slaves his ancestor had. Y'all trace your history. Oh boy. And see how many slaves y'all ancestors had. Come on now. That's a touchy subject. But why does the truth always hurt? And I'm going to tell you, get the book, pick it up, $40 Million Slave. It's an old book by William C. Rhodes. And it's a pretty good book. It reminds me when he said, now they have this thing where they do your ancestry. And so Henry Louis Gates Jr. does it. And I think he did, what's the actor's name? Not Matt Damon. Matt Damon's buddy, his partner. Oh man, I liked him too. I can't think of his name. He played Batman, but y'all know who I'm talking about. They traced his family back and found that they had slaves, and he told Henry Louis Gates Jr. not to air it, and I think that got out, that he didn't want to air it because he was ashamed. Ben Affleck. That was supposedly a big story. But yeah, you have a lot of people and a lot of white people tracing their thing back and find out that they ancestors had slaves. And I'm not sure if the show still comes on, but I know now a lot of black people are doing it. Because it started out as that anyway. It started out with just mostly black people tracing their roots. Because since roots, we've always been wanting to trace our roots. And then it went from black people celebrities, of course. Then one show they did a black woman that was just a regular person. And what you found out is black people who are popular, actors, singers, it's mostly entertainers. Their ancestors were either freed themselves or did good things after freedom, had land of some kind, maybe worked with some abolitionist groups and got a little something and built on it. And this regular woman found that her ancestors just struggle. Which means that the system rewards certain kinds of people and can keep rewarding you for generations. It all depends on how you are. Now, I think now in the 21st century, everybody's falling into a pit because of the way economics is going and the way automation is coming. I mean, everything is automated. So we actually have moved out of the plantation society for the first time ever in this country's history. And again, I still think 2020 was the marking point. I still think that was the point in which we realized that you can give people stimulus, keep them home from unimportant jobs. Remember, essential workers had to go. If essential workers were going and working from home, everybody else was unessential. This is something people don't really talk about. If those people were essential and hardly no one was out on the street, that means either a large minority or the majority of the workers are non-essential. Which means we're working, but you're not really producing anything. You're just working to have jobs. And that whole thing is going out. And I'm gonna tell you this. Um, Anybody who deals in retail, you just about don't need. You don't need cashiers. You have self checkout. You do need people who stock, but you don't need a stock. You don't need to have a person on staff to stock. You can outsource stocking. You can go on one of these handyman sites or sites where people rent their time, and you can outsource. So almost everything in the supermarket, everything in the store, you don't need people to do it. You don't need at least staff members where you got to pay insurance and all, and corporations don't like to do that. So I still like to say that we're moving out of the plantation phase, and that's part of a lot of the problems. But you read books like this and you start to realize, yeah, there's still some residue from it. There's still some um, certain industries, certain institutions, because you've been a plantation society for a long time, and we didn't keep up the alternative institutions, right? We didn't keep them up. It's if things like the SCLC, the NAACP, the Nation of Islam kept itself up. It got itself back together. But organizations like that, I know the Black Panthers are kind of still around, but they're not what they were. If we had institutions and organizations like that, SNCC and CORE and all these organizations, we wouldn't be in such a big hole. I don't think. And if these organizations are still around, they're nothing like what they used to be. But of course, we're not like what those people were. Somebody was talking about, oh, Jonathan Majors kept talking about he needs his Coretta Scott King. And I even said online, listen, there is no Coretta Scott Kings. There are no Martin Luther King Jr. This is a different time. And those people don't exist. Those types don't exist. We're struggling. We're trying to, those of us who are trying to hold on to our humanity, we're struggling just to hold on to it, because the overwhelming majority and the tide is pushing you towards savagery and selfishness and greed and griminess. And that's the way it is. So we don't have those people. We don't have those institutions. I think the young people are trying to maybe get back there, but it's kind of difficult. They don't know it. Like, I was around in the 70s when communities were intact, where you knew each other, not just your neighbor, but the people all in the block, on the next block, the block that, I don't know my neighbors. I see them, I say hello, they say hello back. We don't know each other. You know what I mean? So, we'll see. It's a very exciting time. But, and again, it's a very horrible time, because the people who have a grasp of the power, I think they're content to just let everything fall apart and see what happens after that. Let a lot of people die, let a lot of people struggle. That's why the thing in Palestine is so important, because we see people starving to death because you won't give them food. Food is there on the border waiting. People are there trying to give them food and trying to give them, and one party just says no. And they're getting away with it, and somebody's going to be next. If Israel can get away with it, then England can get away with it. United States can get away with some of its population. Australia can get away with it. Hell, Nigeria can get away with it. Brazil can get away with it. Anybody can get away with it. So, I mean, again, we have the ability to do better, but we must do it. And we must take the power out of the hands of these madmen. We've been allowing them to run it too long anyway. They need a rest. They need to sit down. I went way too long in this video, way too long in this podcast, but look, Get $40 Million Slave. Read it if you wanna. If this interests you, really good book. Patreon.com/Connerson Center. Etsy.com/shop/Connerson Center. You can buy and get all the courses. You can read the scripts. You can buy the scripts and own them. So support. You can also become a sponsor, and you can give directly by donating. Take care. Be good. Take care of each other. Okay? Yeah, it's getting warm again. It's getting a little violent. Watch out for each other and watch your backs.